William Morris, Chapter 8, Supah Ritz. LA is a car town. You feel it the first time you pull into the city, careening down the Cajon Pass, 8 lanes of sprawling blacktop that plummet and rise in and out of the fog, the giant ribbon of asphalt heaving like a roller coaster as big rigs and muscle cars roar past you. You don't have what it takes, they're telling you. You're never going to survive the no-holds-barred roller derby that awaits you at the lawless terminus of the I-10. You white-knuckle your way down a 4,200-foot drop in elevation that feels like a full-blown mushroom trip gone bad. But then it suddenly begins to ease. The fog clears, the highway flattens and widens to a full 12 lanes, and the traffic smooths as the full force of the Class 5 Rapid dissipates over the wide floodplain of the Los Angeles basin. You float smoothly into SoCal's golden sun. The 10 becomes a lazy river meandering through the spindly palms, swaying over the apartment houses with their thick banks of luxurious bougainvillea. But all the spots on the streets are filled with Mercedes and shiny BMWs, and you realize this is the real Los Angeles Thunderdome, the battle to the death fought for status over who rolls on the fanciest wheels. I was driving something called a Mercure XR4 Ti. Don't ask. My brother convinced me to get it because it was the fastest, highest performing car you could get for the money. It was a stick shift with a turbo engine and something like 285 horsepower. It was made by Ford, but in Germany. Yeah, no one in Los Angeles was impressed either. If success in Hollywood is 80% perception, it was perceived as a Ford. Even worse, a try-hard Ford. All my friends made fun of me. They called it KITT, K-I-T-T, after the Knight Rider show. And my brother and his girlfriend bought an airbrushed license plate, a wolf howling at the moon, and had it custom engraved with my childhood diminutive, Nicky. I could have removed it, I guess, but you had to have a pretty solid sense of self to make yourself the butt of a joke about your car in Los Angeles in the 90s. I wanted to be the guy who could play it that cool. I wanted to be the guy who didn't have his identity tied up in his automobile. At least I wanted you to believe I was like that. I had the Mercure packed to the gills with my clothes, golf clubs, and stereo equipment as I pulled off the highway at La Cienega and into the crazy mix of beat-up mini-malls, high-end boutiques, and sleepy neighborhoods full of romantic bungalows that was West Hollywood in the 90s. I had secured a sofa in my friend Heather's place on La Jolla for 3 consecutive nights. Really. As I pulled up next to her fat Lexus sedan parked by the curb, I believed I would somehow find an apartment and a job in a strange new city in 72 hours. But that was largely the way I rolled. I was an optimist back then. Heather shared the house, an airy 2-bedroom with tasteful furniture and a generous yard, with one roommate and her boyfriend's cat, a dark sable with a luxurious coat. His name was Mouse. You can imagine how, if you were a cat, being named after a famous Strauss opera might go to your head. Mouse had some serious delusions of grandeur. I was part of none of them. My very first night in town, I went carousing with some college friends, driving my Mercure drunk all over the city, as you did back then. And when I got home, I stripped my underwear, plopped down on my couch, pulled the comforter up to my chin, and stretched out my legs till my feet went straight into a puddle of cold urine. Mouse had pissed in my bed. Things only escalated from there. I unpacked the Mercure, cluttering the place with my giant amplifier and endless wires, and a few days into my 3-day stay, my host roommate announced that he was moving out. I don't think I was the cause of his departure, but suddenly his room was available, and I took it over with his queen-size bed left intact. This did not sit well with the cat. On my first night in my new room, I came home from another late-night carouse, crawled into my bed, and knew something wasn't right. There was a smell that didn't seem like me, and didn't seem like it could just be stuck in my bed, some previous funk still trapped between the covers. I turned on the light and tossed back the covers to find Mouse had shit in my bed. He hadn't just shit on top of it, he had crawled under the covers to shit inside it. He was a devious fuck. I felt like I was getting hazed. I tried not to let it get to me. I tried to play it cool, but he could see right through me. Mouse knew what I was made of. After a couple months, our lease was up and we moved to a duplex in Hancock Park that had one of those rickety metal staircases that snaked up from the car park in the back and ended at a heavy metal door off our kitchen. My roommate parked her Lexus there, but I never parked the Mercure back there. I wasn't a great driver and it was a tight fit. I also wasn't wild about making small talk with my landlord, a nosy Filipino man in his late 40s who was always out there shining his own fat Lexus. Still, I can't pretend that when my roommate left town to work on location on a film shooting in Maryland, guarding Tess, a veritable masterpiece by today's standards of mainstream Hollywood cinema, I wasn't tempted to slip down the back stairs and slide behind the wheel of her car and enjoy for once the perception of success. By that point, the Mercure was racking up an impressive tally of parking tickets. There was a leak in its cooling system, and I would regularly have to leap from the driver's side door, drag an industrial container of iridescent green liquid from my trunk, splashing it all over my William Morris suit as I refilled the cooling system to keep the car from overheating. Also, I couldn't for the life of me keep gas in the tank. I was always running late to some dinner, praying I would get there before running out of fuel. I wasn't always successful. You want to know what true failure feels like? Let your beat up American weirdo car run out of gas as it's crossing the intersection of Melrose and La Cienega on a Friday at rush hour. You don't know your true strength until you've leapt from your moving vehicle, driven your shoulder into the window frame of the driver's side door, and desperately tried to push your car all the way to the valet line at Cicada. Well, I had forbade Deflate a Mouse from entering my room at this point. I was young and drunk half the time, and I kept forgetting to close my door. I'd wake up in the middle of the night with the cat sitting on my chest, staring into my sleeping face, its whiskered mug dripping with contempt. I see you, Nick. I know what you are. You pretend to be better than everyone, but you're just like the rest. Terrified, I'd hurl him off my bed, and he'd go screeching out of my room in confirmation of the bias he'd come there to dissect. Of course, he was right. It wasn't long before I woke up late for work one morning to find my car out of gas and just slipped behind the glove leather wheel of my roommate's ride. I had no choice. I was late, but oh, that baby was smooth, and soon I was just driving it every day. I tried to take care of it. I did my best to flick my toenails out the window instead of letting them pile up like the elephant graveyard around the petals of my Mercure. It's sad to say, but the cat was right about how it would make me feel. My shallow self-esteem improved dramatically when I noted the envy on my work friends' faces as I stepped out of my cush ride. Deflate a Mouse had other ideas for my self-esteem. Every time I trudged up those back stairs from my roommate's car, he was lying in wait, determined to snake out the back door and run off into the city. He'd have his teeth bared and lunge at me as I entered the apartment. It was terrifying, and I began to suspect his game. His plan was to go missing, so I'd have to confess I'd let him out after joyriding in the Lexus without my roommate's permission. And at one point, he finally succeeded. I don't know how he did it. It might have been a momentary lapse in vigilance. Then again, I might have just left the door wide open. We'll never know. He was gone, and I couldn't find him, and I had to get to my job at WMA. I would have to call my roommate to confess. What a nightmare. I really hated that cat, but boy did I pray he'd come home. When I got back from work that night, our landlord was in my living room repairing some cracks in the chimney left by the Northridge quake. He sent his kids to the super fancy private all-girls school right up the street, so I assumed he was doing all right. But he pinched pennies by doing his own maintenance. He also loved a deal. He wasn't above scavenging our throwaways for his own use. I'd seen my roommate's broken office fan cooling his garage, and came home one afternoon to find him washing his sedan in a pair of glow-in-the-dark Valentine's Day underwear my mother had sent me. He had let himself into the apartment, which always creeped me out, and was up on a ladder applying a layer of spackle when I passed through the living room. He stopped his work and climbed down to talk to me. "Nick," he said. His English was less than perfect. "I always want to know." He paused, trying to find the right words. "How you get so Ritz?" He was saying rich, but it sounded like Ritz. I was taken aback. No one's really this direct about money where I'm from. What's more, as I explained, I'm not really rich. I mean, I have a rich stepfather, but I started thinking about the Lexus. Was he confused about its ownership now that it was me tooling around behind its wheel? I tried to clarify. Heather's the rich one, I explained. And now he was coming at me across the living room, brandishing his spackle knife. He was excited. He was getting nearer the truth. "Nick, that's what I mean. Because I talked to Heather, and she say, sure, she Ritz. But you, Supah Ritz." Supah Ritz. That was me. I tried to imagine my roommate being like, "Oh yeah, I'm rich," because it was true. But then telling my landlord he should really look for me when the bill collector comes knocking. He folded up his ladder and carried it toward the kitchen. "Oh, by the way," he said, "I let your cat back in." Sure enough, Deflate a Mouse was sitting on the counter in the kitchen, observing the whole exchange. Maybe his plan had been foiled, but he knew the score. Eventually, Heather and her boyfriend broke up, and we moved to a place in Beverly Hills. Deflate a Mouse went to live with his dad. We'd come to a cold peace by then. I knew he knew, and he knew I knew, and maybe that was enough. I had also, in fact, eventually been caught, and maybe that brought him some peace. Someone had seen me roll up to brunch in the Lexus. LA's a small town, now coated in a signature layer of thick Nick Morton dirt, and called Heather to let her know. This was clearly not what she had bargained for. To her credit, she didn't seem to care. It was my problem if I felt I needed to steal a fancy car to feel cool, to pretend to be something I wasn't. Also, by that point, my dad had given me his old BMW, and suddenly I was pulling up to valets all over town like I was born to play the part. Supah Ritz. Maybe Deflate a Mouse sensed it. This was no longer his battle to fight. But I left my old XR4 Ti parked outside our apartment building for weeks. I just couldn't get it together to bring it to my new house. It sat there racking up even more parking tickets until one day the city came and tried to impound it. My landlord intervened. He paid the delinquency on the spot and convinced the city to leave the car in his care. He called me and begged me to buy it. He really wanted that thing. I think he'd gotten his signifiers confused. The Lexus, I wanted to tell him, was the fancy car. But hey, I was super Ritz, and that was the lifestyle he craved. We made a deal for the XR4 Ti, less the money he'd already advanced to get it out of Hawk. His only caveat was I had to come to Hancock Park and teach him how to drive a stick. It was a golden afternoon. I'm sure I was hungover, but it hadn't been that long since my own father had taught me how to drive. The lesson was emblazoned on my brain, and my landlord and I cruised the empty blocks of big houses, stuttering and stopping until he got the hang of it. It was near Thanksgiving and his girls were coming home. One of them must have been in college by then. He told me his wife made the best turkey in the whole world. All his kids and their boyfriends, they loved it so much they looked forward to it all year. Nick, you don't understand, he impressed upon me. This turkey tastes so good. It doesn't even taste like turkey. It was a fair point. We were all just aspiring to be something we weren't.